Sorry, everybody. I am Mathieu. We found our last participant, so he's joining in 2 minutes, so we can start. I will be moderating this panel about expanding African network to the world. Obviously, the panel is going to be in English, but if you want to ask questions in French, I will be able to translate to our panelists those questions. Juste un mot en français. Donc le panel sera en anglais, mais pour ceux qui souhaitent et qui sont plus confortables à poser des questions en français, n'hésitez pas. Je pourrai faire la traduction aux panélistes pour qu'ils vous répondent. So I will be, giving a few minutes to each participant so they can present themselves at network, what they are doing, and I want that session to be as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any question, once I open the floor, come with us, ask questions to those folks. They have networks, they have been able to expand the network out of their original country. They probably faced a lot of challenges, technical, political, financial, any kind of stuff everybody in this room is seeing every day. So they will be very helpful with us. Mitsuki, can we have the slides for the, I don't know if, for the first person that will be presenting? I think Ben, you don't have slides and you were late, so you're going to be first. So we have Ben from Walk Online, please.
Hi everyone. As Mathieu said, I'm Ben Madison from Work Online Communications. I'm based out of Cape Town. A little bit of background on who we are and what we do. We're a network service provider. We provide exclusively wholesale services. So that's things like wholesale IP transits, long-haul transmission and transport services. It's a very simple offering. It's a very simple operation. And we try and make sure that we keep it that way because that's what allows us to remain agile but still be competitive. As I say, I'm based out of Cape Town. We've got operations in Nairobi and Johannesburg on the continent. And we have several sites off of the continent as well. And those evolve over time. But usually they start off as peering pops. They usually start off as sites that we build in order to be able to improve the performance to traffic for traffic destined off of the continent. The first of them was London. That happened a number of years ago, and I was in Frankfurt actually just a few days ago, putting the final touches to that site. So we've now had a fair amount of experience of working, both on the continent and off of it. You can probably hear from my accent that I originally hail from London. So that simplifies things from a travel perspective for me. I look after the network operations team. I've got a nice small close-knit team working underneath me, and we've got people that work on the commercial side under my colleague Edward Lawrence, who some of you have met as well. I think maybe I will try and keep it brief like that, since we're trying to get through this early.
Exactly. Thanks, Ben. Who's next on the slide deck? Mitsuki, please. It's going to be Ben one, so please, go for it.
Okay. The main one is originally an organization that started off in about 2010 in Nigeria. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. We have exchanges in the Nigerian Internet Exchange, the London Internet Exchange, AM6, as well as the Ghana Internet Exchange. Next slide, please. Main One owns an undersea fiber cable from Lagos, Nigeria, all the way to Portugal and then to London. Multiple branching units as well. Last month, we extended the branching unit to Cameroon. So you can see all the way down, multiple branching units to actually branch out to the West African countries. The diagram on the right shows you some of the countries that we currently have services, as well as a planned connection. So there's a planned connection you would see somewhere between Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso. Okay, so eight West African countries, and these connections are growing largely based on demand. Next slide. Okay, here is just a quick chart on how Main One has evolved through the years, from 2010 when we launched the submarine cable, all the way down to 2015 when we launched this 600 rack data center in Lagos, and in 2016 when we launched our cloud services. So this is largely the evolution of Main One providing services along the West African coast. Thank you.
Thank you. It was brief, perfect. Who's next? Darwin, please. Thanks.
Oh, bom dia, everyone. Just trying to bring the Portuguese content locally as well. And thanking Netflix as well to bring the second season of Narcos, because my advice for you guys is if you guys want to learn some Portuguese, better start with some Spanish. So I'm with Angola Cables. I'm Darren. I'm a global product manager for Angola Cables. Angola Cables is one of the major shareholders on WEX. It's a company formed by the 5 major operators, telecommunication operators in Angola. We actually represent the country. We act as a gateway interface for international and national connectivity. Going back to the topic, which is African networks going cross borders, we are doing that as well. And as you can see on the screen, we are moving. I will start with European backbone. That's what we call it. We just started our European backbone, and we are building the European backbone for a primary reason. We want to prepare the west coast of Africa to be ready for the South Atlantic cable, which is coming very soon. So therefore, we are building the European network, and we just launched our AP POP in Portugal, because if you guys don't know, Portugal and Madrid are coming up as well as one of the big hubs in Europe. And when comparing the latency between Portugal, Madrid to UK, we are actually saving a lot of milliseconds. I would say something like 20 to 30 milliseconds, and trying to get the content for the most closest European countries back to our African customers, I would say so. One of our biggest projects right now at the moment is definitely the South Atlantic cable. I still can recall when we start being present at those conferences that nobody actually trusted and believed that we ever will build this cable. But right now it's a reality. It's a 40 terabit system between Angola to Brazil in Fortaleza. The same landing station that we have in Angola, which is called Sangano Beach, will be the same landing station for the South Atlantic system. And we are building a data center in Fortaleza. And with an extension of this system, we are in a consortium as well, which is connecting Brazil up to Miami in Boca Raton, which is called Monet, the Monet cable. It's a 60 terabit system. It will be ready somewhere in 2017, and we hope to have SACS, the South Atlantic cable, ready to be used between second and third quarter of 2018. So this will definitely be a game changer for Africa. When you look into Africa and South America as well, because there is a lot of content being generated in South America and so in Africa, and there is definitely a need to have a directly route between both continents in order to exchange traffic more easily and with the better latency. Just imagine something like 50 to 60 round trip delay between both countries. I think this will be a massive change for the African operators and for the South American ones as well. So we are, like I said before, we are expanding our IP networks and our transmission services to Europe, to South America, and also to North America. So we are definitely going cross borders, and right now it's not only a dream, it's also a reality, and we are doing that as well. So if you guys have any more questions, we have a booth over here, just find me out, and more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Darwin. Now we have another band from Liquid Telecom.
Oh, okay. Okay. So very brief history of Liquid Telecom. Founded in 2002 as voice of a satellite operator, and we first interconnected in 2002. We got an AS number in 2003, and we first appeared in Africa in 2004 in Zimbabwe because we realized the cost of satellite bandwidth was so much that we needed to exchange anything we could locally. It wasn't very much, but it was some cost saving in cost. I met Machuki in 2006. And there's significance there in that some of the conversations I've had with him over the years and this community he's introduced me to with these conferences has guided some of our decisions we've made along the way. So that's why it comes into Liquid Telecom timeline. We launched fiber in Zimbabwe 2010, in Zambia in 2011. We were awarded Best African Wholesale Carrier in 2012 and 2013 and 2014 and 2015. Acquired Kenya Data Networks and expanded to East Africa in 2013. We have announced this year that we are acquiring Neotel in South Africa, and we will have 2 more countries we'll be announcing before the end of this year. I wanted to just have a couple of words on why we're building subsea cables when the existing ones are not full. Everyone's seen this diagram, I think, a lot of times. It just goes to show there's lots of subsea cables. $3 billion has been spent on subsea cables in Africa in the last 7 years. Most of these cables are less than 7 years old, and they're all built to last 25 years. And none of them are full. Not any of them are even close to being full. And we are seeing more and more content caching is coming to the continent and hosting of data and content, meaning that we're actually using our subsea cables less than we probably bargained for when we put down our business plans 5-10 years ago. Meanwhile, there's a new generation of subsea cables making their way to Africa. Next slide. My group have announced a Liquid Sea project on the East Coast. Djibouti Telecom have announced the DARE cable serving the Horn of Africa. PCCW and Telkom South Africa and others have announced Africa One Consortium, a mega system connecting Africa to Europe. Seemingly 5 and AE1, they're not touching Africa, but these are very big mega systems being built connecting Asia to Europe. This is bringing an awful lot of capacity to the Gulf. Very large investments have been made, and this is a driving factor for some of the projects that are going on. There's other projects to take advantage of that capacity from Arab nations to Africa. Those countries that have invested in those big systems want to sell some capacity to Africa. Potential new Indian Ocean projects. Multiple proposals, as well as the one that Angola Cables have just shown us, multiple proposed projects from South America to Southern Africa. So I think theirs is more in the realization stage, others are being talked about. And there have been very big upgrades on Teams and WACS and making those systems much higher capacity than they were designed for. And Easy Upgrade 3 is on its way and is going to do the same for Easy. Next slide. So why are people building new ones if we haven't, if we're upgrading the old ones and they're not run out? I put down 6 reasons when I thought about it. First is connecting the unconnected. So some countries, places like Eritrea, some of the states in Somalia, Somaliland, etc., haven't missed out on the first wave of cables. Even Angola, I think, wasn't initially in wax when it was first deployed. So these emerging places, like northern Mozambique, with a lot of oil, so places like that are needing connectivity, and then they had not previously been connected by the first wave of systems. Greater diversity. So the main, one of the main drivers is needing for greater diversity. The only way to bring down the costs and increase the reliability is to have more and more systems. 1 is not enough, 2 is nice, but 3, 4, 5 is what you need. And South African prices only really dropped when 5 cable systems were landing in South Africa. So that's, that brings in, the diversity brings up the reliability, and that also increases the competition in the marketplace. There's new entrants in the market. Back in 2008, there was a lot of established older players in the telco world in Africa who were investing in cable systems, but now the world is dominated by new entrants like Vodafone and Vodacom, and who we're not investing in cable systems quite so much when Easy and was being built. Even companies like Google are now they're looking to build their own cable systems because they're exchanging so much traffic across the world that they're investing in these systems. And advancements in technology. So modern cable systems, basically we're looking at 100G wavelengths, and that means that the technologies there able to bring much more cost-effective systems in the running and the capacity delivered. Next slide. And then the last reason I thought was, really around just keeping the subsea cable industry going. So the vendors particularly have a lot of scientists and engineers, and these people are developing new things, and the vendors are still there. This means that the vendors are giving very good pricing for the subsea cable projects. They're also dropping prices and financing the project. So as well as Main One connecting to Cameroon, I think Cameroon to Nigeria government project was funded by Huawei Submarine. And then also, we have consultants and cable strategy people who are sitting in large telcos and operators there who are the ones who are driving the operators to start investing in these systems. Just mention, I thought of the interconnect points for Africa. London was the first with a lot of the subsea cables going. The operators giving bundled packages of connectivity to London. So that made DKICs, links a very important peering point for Africa. Some networks have expanded out to other peering points in Europe as well, such as AM6 DKIC, NetNod. North America, there isn't very much African interconnection going on in North America at the moment, but South America is coming with the projects that we're talking about here and connecting Angola to Brazil. India and Singapore, there's connectivity on cables to both of those places, but hardly any traffic is being exchanged at the moment between India and between that part of the world and Africa. China, well, they're here. They're here today, and China Telecom, and then you see a lot of Chinese are in Africa. So that is going to be an emerging point for interconnection and peering, as well as Marseille and Portugal. So we've already heard. I won't mention anymore, but lower latencies by peering closer as you connect into Europe. And Djibouti and Fujairah, as these are interconnection points where Africa can hop off onto these new, Europe-Asia cables, at some cost of cross connects on the way. So the cross connects can be quite expensive from time to time. And then just to mention that other types of interconnect partnerships, as well as we talk about peering a lot in this event, but it's not the only one. Voice interconnects are there. And NNIs, both for exchange of MPLS traffic and TDM traffic, though the sort of STM1 NNI is going to fall away and become irrelevant over a couple of years' time. And then, mobile operators as well, exchanging their mobile data at GOX and IPX exchanges. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Last but not least, we have Frank, who is our local guy in Tanzania.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Frank from Simbanet, Tanzania, which is part of the Wananchi group of companies, which also contains the triple play service offering of Suku in Kenya and in Tanzania, and direct-to-home satellite TV in most of the neighboring countries, Eastern and Central Africa. But we as Simbanet, we are part of the subgroup, the business services unit within the Wananchi group, and having operations in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, Zambia, and Malawi. And the services that we are providing include solutions and voice and security services, internet access to businesses mostly, and wholesale internet to ISPs, as well as MPLS solutions in all of those countries. We are operating our own cross-border links between Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, and Malawi, and using, of course, in Tanzania, the national ICT backbone for this, as we discussed yesterday. And in Zambia, there's the electricity company that has the fiber to the border and to Lusaka. And we have implemented and are running already, it's like our own fiber within Malawi that is connecting from the Tanzanian border to Lilongwe and also from the Zambian border to Lilongwe. And that kind of, if you know the mathematics, we can do any speed on that, and the limiting factor now would be the costing of capacities inside the Tanzanian range of NICTPV to offer services in Malawi, as was discussed yesterday. So as the business services branch of the group, we can also offer services outside of Africa destinations like London and Fujairah, and we have a presence in Terraco in South Africa. Customers mostly include ISPs, financial services, industries, and in Dar es Salaam also mobile operators where we can provide dark fibers between different sites. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank, and everybody for those quick presentations. So obviously I have questions, and I guess you guys, I have questions too. So I will be asking one or two questions because I don't want to take all of them, and then I will open the questions to the floor. So we see that we have different businesses. Some are doing only wholesale, some are doing only B2B, some are cable operators, some started with satellite, voice, and then move on to capacity, IP transit, and diversify. So we have very different part of our business. Some owns infrastructure, some rent it. What has been one of the biggest challenge building that network? Some had to go through the sea. So what kind of problem did you face building those cables? Some had to go through terrestrial and doing cross-border interconnection. So you had to deal with regulators of many countries trying to cross those borders, working with electrical companies or highway or local government. So what has been your biggest challenges?
So I mean, when it comes to the you asked about cross-border stuff, the biggest challenge in it was just to get started and just to work out how to do it. Our first cross-border was Zimbabwe to South Africa, and there'd been microwaves on each side of the border looking at each other for some years and years and years to exchange voice traffic. But, the mobile operators and they hadn't been able to secure the permissions and commercial arrangements with the partners on the other side to do that. So we kicked off just because we got the first glimmer of hope. We got permission from the Zimbabwean regulator to cross the border. That was the first permission we got. So the regulator opened up that possibility. That's the telecoms regulator. So we went and got a $60 million loan in order to build the cable to do that. After we borrowed the money, we then realized that we needed to get permission from about 9 other different parties, and we only had one. We borrowed $60 million, and we were starting digging it into the ground, we'd actually completely finished all the build, and we only got the final permission, which was from the owners of the bridge, which is the bike bridge crossing of the Limpopo. And having spent $60 million, we still couldn't even light it up because we didn't have that final permission. And we got that final permission just pretty much the day after we finished doing the build, and we were ready to light it up. So we had to take a very big risk in terms of getting all the permissions. Having done it once, we as Liquid knew kind of what to do, so next time it wasn't so hard.
Yes, Darwin again. Thanks for actually raising this question. Well, since we're cross-boarding with our visions and doing things happen, from what I can see, we didn't face actually many problems. But one of the things that we could see is that actually when we trying to apply for IP resources, I actually want to congratulate RIPE and Afrinic to be so responsive and to be so quick in our requirements, but the same is not happening as quick as we expected in South America. So actually, that was actually the only thing we faced it so far. But a round of applause for Afrinic, because I think they are doing a very good job for Africa.
Okay, Chidi, main one. Okay, well, I think some of the challenges we faced were around regulation in some of the countries, as well as, I would say, monopolistic tendencies by the incumbent operators. That's only natural to expect, I think. So you would notice in one of the diagrams, diagrams displayed, we're not only going through the sea. Some of our connections are terrestrial, because even though we have branching units just by the side of some of the countries along the West African coast, we need permission or license to be able to land in those countries. And so we've had to form partnerships to build across into other countries, working also with Ghana, because we're also landed in Ghana. So from Ghana, we can reach out to Burkina, and we can reach out to Ivory Coast through partnerships with local operators. So one of the things we've had to do, and do a bit more aggressively, is forming those partnerships that will aid the flow of those connections, terrestrial connections. Yeah. Thank you.
So I find it interesting that a couple of the examples given they underline a decision that we took as a business fairly early on, that we wanted to remain as far as possible a services business and not an infrastructure or capital management business. And so as a result of that, we generally prefer to either lease or take IRU arrangements, or some sort of infrastructure use arrangement with the owners of that infrastructure where we can, where that option exists. And the obvious advantage of that, there are times when it's unavoidable and we need to build things ourselves, but the advantage of that is that we are generally fairly well insulated from the kind of problems that other people have described. There are people who have been doing this longer than us on the continent and have got more experience, and quite often they're able to meet our needs without us having to go and reinvent the wheel. The kind of problems that we face as a result tend to be, when we enter a new market or we go and pop a new location, they tend to be regulatory. Our build out progress has actually been very largely determined by the regulatory environments that we found both on the continent and off of it. We will typically earmark a territory that we want to be in quite long before it's actually feasible either because there is a monopoly incumbent who we're unable to compete against legally. There are difficulties in licensing regimes, or there have been challenges in terms of corruption in certain places as well that we've come across. And we prefer to walk away from a market rather than being involved in that. So it's generally been those kind of issues that we've come across. That is usually on the continent. Off of the continent, our footprint in Europe is much more straightforward because of the mature regulatory environment and slightly mature interconnection market that exists there. Off of the continent, the challenges are logistical. I've been looking forward to the day that we come across the same problems repeatedly. But at this point, they're all still new ones. And they're minor things. When you're traveling large, when you're sending teams of engineers large distances to install infrastructure, provision services, sometimes from people that you haven't dealt with other than, across several time zones before, small things go wrong that when you're that far away from home are a bit of a showstopper. I've had very large, expensive routers arrive at sites with no rack mount kits. And a rack mount kit is a small thing that can cost you a couple of weeks and several $100,000. The challenges of getting interconnects with some of the very large global networks run. I today actually have an issue in Frankfurt where the size of some of the global telcos has gotten to the point where nobody can actually tell me who in this particular company is authorized to run cross-connect in a particular facility. This has now been going on for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of delays in turning up a fairly large intercontinental service adds up rapidly. But the underlying cause of it is small things like authorizations for cross connects, getting rack mounts delivered, and because of time zone differences and linguistic differences, and people who are working away from home and having to kind of run out of hotel rooms, those kind of small problems are much more amplified than when you're working closer to home and you can actually go and sit in a room with someone.
Okay, for me, a little bit more Tanzania specific perspective. As Simonet, we are rolling out our own fiber infrastructure in Dar es Salaam. And the experience is that within Tanzania, as far as I know, the laws and licensing regime look very good on paper, but then there are always some other things, like when Roberts mentioned, permits that you have to get from the actual owner of the land and things like this that take up a lot of time to organize and clarify and so on and follow up. That adds up to the timelines it takes to roll out some infrastructure. We have the advantage that we can also attach our cables to the electricity poles, which is another large contract that is to be taken care of and another partner to talk with all the time. But things are possible, so we are working on it, and it's unfortunately more challenging if you go across the country between cities or to the borders.
Okay, thanks. I can hear from your answers, but also from your presentation that all of you are present in Europe, being Portugal, being London or Frankfurt, either you peer or you just land with your submarine cables. Very few actually go outside Europe. Angola Cable is building towards South America. Liquid is going to Fujairah and then east to Asia. But we have a big dependency on Europe in terms of international connectivity, in terms of being linked to the world. And also, this will be solved probably for the Southern African country, and West Coast with a new cable from Angola Cable. And there's also a new one that has been advertised between Cameroon and Brazil also. But still, we have this big dependency on Europe. So what can be done to avoid that? Obviously, I guess having content locally. So we have most of the traffic we consume on the continent being on the continent. And the other part of the question is, compared to your experience in deploying network in African countries, how difficult was it to expand in Europe, buying circuit there, putting your equipment, having co-location contract? Was it hard? Was it easy? And what ideas can we take and give to probably the regulator in this audience so it becomes more easy to deploy network in Africa and somewhere in the world?
Yeah, so the first was about the dependency on Europe. Yeah, I mean, I think the cables that are connecting without going to Europe, so there are, we'll see that with China expanding its networks into Africa, that traffic between the Far East will now be exchanged directly in the Middle East. It won't be coming via Europe, which it traditionally has been, making latencies very high. So that's some of these new cables that are potentially being proposed from East Africa to the Gulf, and the existing Teams cable from Mombasa to Fujairah. We'll see more traffic will be going east going forwards. It's quite good. There's a lot of Chinese in Africa, and because of the language difference, that means that those Chinese, when they're using the internet, they're consuming Chinese websites. They're not looking at North American websites. They're using their own apps. They're using their own different social media, that different from the ones we may be using. And then the interesting things going on crossing the Atlantic is going to change the game in terms of the dependencies on Europe. How difficult is it to do network expansion in Europe, and lessons from that? Well, it's the easiest thing in the world to build network in Europe, other than logistical things that Ben's been talking about. For us, I've got people and engineers in London and Europe, and so I don't have those problems. But just buying equipment, finding people that can install it, finding people that can configure it, it's very, very easy, and it's a very easy thing to do. You find trustworthy and good partners to look at and support POPs in any of these countries. And then it comes to on the regulatory side. Well, it's even easier on the regulatory side. I mean, to build a POP in France or Germany or UK. From a regulatory side, you have to do, absolutely nothing. You just go and do it. You don't need a telecoms license to put a router in Telehouse London. You don't need a telecoms license to go to France. You just go and sign the commercial contracts, which are easily there, and you can negotiate with the hosting partners and the interconnection partners that are there. It's a mature ecosystem, and there's no regulator and there's no regulation to hamper you or make your life difficult or tax you. And when it comes to taking your money for fees and licenses, you don't need to establish businesses in those places. And you don't have any of the cost and overhead of that. So, we heard a regulator say yesterday that in West Africa, the role of the regulator is to protect the telecom business. So if the role of the regulators is to protect existing business and make it difficult for people to invest in Africa, then they might be doing a good job. They're doing it well, because it isn't so easy.
So actually, I think a very good question was raised, and I think everybody's expecting the South Atlantic cable to actually solve this dependency. So do we as Angola Cables, but more cables coming into that route should be fine as well. Like you guys mentioned, Cameroon to Brazil or other points. I think definitely the time is coming, and somehow it will happen in the future, medium long term, I don't know. But we definitely trusting in our South Atlantic cable implementation, and we hope that we at least can solve a bit of this problem. When it comes to localizing global content locally, well, I think a few of you guys are doing that already from the previous presentations. South Africa doing a good job, other countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and others. We are doing the same in Angola, and we believe that this is very important also for the local community, but also for the region, especially on the ACDC region. If I may use your words, on Europe, I actually share the same feelings. We are not facing any problems at all so far, but if we have, or if we notice any bad experience in the future, we definitely totally open to share that as well, but so far it's going perfect.
Okay, with regards to expansion of networks in Europe, I think that's a general feeling that it's a lot easier. When it comes to the lessons that we can draw from that for Africa, I would say that in terms of how we build facilities here in Africa, we need to not only focus on infrastructure, we need to focus on the processes that we need to run those infrastructures. We need to focus on the procedures. We need to focus on competence of the people that run the facilities as well. I think that's where we have a huge gap here in Africa, where we need to ensure that people are trained and have the right skills to run the facilities, run the operations, and also process consciousness. In Europe, you want to do something very little, there's a procedure for getting it done. There's not just a procedure, there's a time when it's got to be done. It's got to be scheduled. There's got to be notifications. I mean, these are the procedures, right? And sometimes you want it done immediately. You're in Africa, you think you can get it done just in the next 2 days, but they tell you, I'm sorry, you can get it done in 2 days. You have to wait. I need to contact this person and to get in touch with that person. You know, there's a process, and the process may take, the change management process may take a week. Sometimes it takes slightly longer. It may be a challenge for us here in Africa because sometimes, you know, we just want to plug the cable and unplug the cable and get it working and move on. So I think these are some of the things we can learn to improve our systems and improve the way we operate and provide services. Quality in Africa is one of the things that we need to work on if we truly are going to attract content to Africa. An average businessman is thinking about uptime of his services and is asking himself, if I keep the content outside, it's, you know, I'm having a 99.999 availability of my services. If I'm going to bring it down here to, let me use Nigeria as an example, what are the challenges I'm going to face? What are the challenges of availability of power, availability of services, competent hands? And so these are the challenges that companies, especially infrastructure companies, have to face to ensure that they're building competence at the same time, skills that match the skills that we have in Europe as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the point about skills is a really important one, and that is one of the primary expansion challenges that we face is finding you know, suitably well skilled hands and eyes to actually do the work that we do. I don't want to kind of spend too much time rehashing the points about the geographical topology of the international connectivity and why that's resulted in us winding up with a large dependency on Europe. I mean, one of the things I would add perhaps to what Ben was saying is that in addition to the fact that there just isn't historically the same kind of cultural exchange between Africa and Asia as there is between Africa and Europe, and so there naturally isn't as much traffic to exchange. I think one of the difficulties is also the cost of interconnection between the north-south systems and the east-west systems. If we saw the cost of interconnection in places like Djibouti and Egypt and Fujairah come down to slightly more realistic levels, we'd see a lot more African networks doing their interconnection there at scale and not just doing it where they have to and using Europe for everything else. In terms of kind of lessons learned from working off of the continent and out of country, one of the recommendations that I'd have for anyone who's just getting into that sort of work now is to try and make sure that you're engaged in the community that you're going into. You know, we have events like this and AIS and AfricaCom and a few others here. The equivalent events exist all over the world. And, you know, some of them have been running for a number of years, if not decades. A lot of the organizations that we are that we interact with, especially in Europe and the States, are much larger and much more established than their equivalents in Africa, because the internet here is just that much more new. And as a result, they can appear from the outside fairly large and faceless. And one of the things that this community, you know, on a global basis, is very good at doing is humanizing those organizations and giving you a point of entry and an understanding of how they work, so that when you do experience logistical challenges and delivery delays and inconsistencies in ordering processes and all of the kind of inevitable stuff that will come up the first time that anyone does this, you have individuals to speak to rather than forms to fill out. And that's made the world of difference to us over the years.
So yeah, I also don't want to rehash everything again. I don't have enough first-hand experience with doing business outside of Africa. But here the same stories, of course. What we probably need to do is also, in addition to what was said, spend some more effort in getting our own house in order. For IXPs, publish the list of the peers, of the traffic statistics, and so on, so that people who come here to events like this from outside, they see what's happening here. They get all the information. If we are having all the intents in peering DB and so on, examples go on, that we can communicate more effectively what's happening, what's going on, and work on all the details that help the growth.
Thanks. Well, obviously I have more questions, but I don't want to be the one only asking questions. So I will raise, if you have any question, please come to the mic, state your name, affiliation. Please, I will be asking you to be brief, and also our panelists to be brief, because we only have 25 minutes left, and I'm sure you have plenty of questions. So we have someone at the back, please.
Hello? Hello? Thank you. My name is Generose Tabaro from the Bank of Tanzania. I'm so glad to be in this forum. I happen to be in this forum, I can say accidentally, because I just popped in the internet and then I launched, I was able to register. So first of all, I wish to thank Isaac and TISPA for preparing such a good forum, and especially on the theme, which is very relevant in my country, as I come from the regulator of the financial system. Personally, I come from the regulatory and the oversight of payment systems in the country. So I've come to notice that TISPA is one of our key stakeholders in this arena. I was very happy to hear about this peering policy, interconnectivity, issues which we advocate for, because they all aim at making these services affordable to our customers or to our financial system stakeholders. And I believe that you are the TISPA or the internet service providers and internet exchange providers. Our key, your key clients are commercial banks, which we regulate. So in that case, as I see in this forum, though I didn't, when I'm looking around, I didn't see your clients such as the financial systems, payment system stakeholders, or financial system stakeholders. So I urge that these are the key stakeholders which you would have involved them in this forum, and us, because us would like to know what you are advocating for. For example, when you advocate for interconnectivity, these are the issues which we talk every day with our clients or the financial stakeholders, the payment system stakeholders, like the mobile network operators. Now we have, when we are talking about internet payments, mobile payments, of course, you are the service providers. These are your clients. So I thought they were the ones who would have been here. Maybe they could have learned more, even us, as regulators of this. I was very happy to know this. When I was asking my colleagues in the office, they said, no, we were not aware of this forum. So I was urging the TISPA to find ways of maybe interacting with us, regulators like the Bank of Tanzania and Tanzania Bankers Association, so that they know what you are dealing with or what you are advocating for. And for example, when you talk about cyber crime, I think—
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have very small time. Can you go straight to the question, please? We have someone from Tanzania, so maybe Frank can also help you.
So I urge TISPA to work closely with the regulators, like the financial system regulators, and also finally to at least go and view our Payment Systems Act. Maybe you could find things in our regulations. Maybe you could find things which we are advocating for, so that you can involve them in your advocacy issues. Thank you very much.
I assume that question was for me. How much time do I have? Okay, first of all, I agree that I'm also disappointed that very, very few of the local mobile operators are here. But then I'm happy that the central bank is represented. Thank you for coming. There are a lot of things that we are doing. Just last week, I was visiting Stefano Mendo there at your office to improve some details in the peering and keeping the local traffic local. That will help researchers as well. I think we should definitely talk directly to each other right after this session. We want the banks to be connected locally, that is whether directly on the internet exchange or through the established internet service providers who are giving the service to the banks. It doesn't matter very much as long as everything is fast, efficient, and happening cheap and locally, and traffic stays local. Let's talk directly.
Yeah, I want to make a point about banking. Perhaps going back to yesterday's thing, but TISPA here is obviously a community-led ISP. That means that anybody really can join it. It's run by the ISP community, but they're open for banks and stuff to join it. It's quite important for banks that they get into this digital age. The mobile operators with services like M-Pesa are eating your lunch right now, and you need to get into banking transfers on mobile apps. I don't use mobile money myself. I use a Barclays Kenya app, and I do all my money transfers from that. And all banks need to get into this age, and that means they need to have their websites, their mobile banking websites, their e-banking websites hosted locally, and they need to have them on the internet exchange points. And when you have some of the internet exchange points that are run by regulators, as we discussed yesterday, these tend to insist that you need to be a licensed telco operator to join those internet exchange points. And that is, of course, deterring banks. And these are local content providers. The Bank of Tanzania is a provider of local content. And that, those people should be able to bring their content to the ISP community.
True, we were talking about regulation earlier on, and Europe. I think we can ask the guys from Links, DECX, AppsX, TransferX, all those European exchanges that are here. As long as you have an AS number, IPs, you can connect to the exchange point, whatever your business is. So banks, ISPs, corporate, whatever. So that's also something we should be looking at in the continent. Any other question? Michel?
Hi, my name's Nishal. This hat's for the professional troublemaker. How many questions are you allowing me?
So far one. We'll see if we have other folks.
Okay, so my first question, my first question was something that Ben alluded to, and I don't necessarily want Ben to answer, but I'd like to hear it from the others. And I'm aware we're short on time, so I'll make it brief. In one sentence, what would you ask regulators? Because we know regulations are broken on this continent. We've all been talking about it for at least 7 years, because AFRIF is 7 years old. And frankly, as the chair of the PEC, I'm getting quite bored of listening to this. And I know we need to talk about it. So if you had to write down one sentence, just one sentence as a message for the guys that are building out African networks. And by the way, thank you so much for that. It's great to hear about African networks being built out and not necessarily northern networks that are coming and taking over here. So what's your one wish to the regulated community? You only get one sentence. And then I've got lots more questions.
Step back and let us do our jobs.
Be an enabler, stand on the sidelines.
Get closer to the community and get our trust.
Maybe charge me less money so I can reinvest my profits into continued growth.
Don't protect the businesses by putting them into a cage.
That's actually 5 really good statements. Any other question before Nishal has? No? Nobody? Nishal, you can go.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad everyone's willing to let me talk. This is very rare. So we're talking about building across the border. You've obviously touched on the issue of regulation. I'm not going to do that. So now I've got a direct question to the operators. I worked at an operator. I think we built what was probably the first African network to go off continent. I also worked for a very greedy operator. So some of you know who they were, and you're laughing at me. Yes, I paid my time. And I can tell you that working at a greedy operator, our job was to maximize profits. That was a big part of what we did. So how much of the problem that we're seeing in cross-border connectivity or lack of cross-border interconnectivity has come out because of the operators wanting to do things like resell expensive VPN services like MPLS instead of going through and creating up internet-related services. Now, there's some notable exceptions. And am I allowed to call out names?
Sure.
Okay, so there's some notable exceptions. I think Liquid's doing an awesome job. They don't have this concept of, well, we're going to connect to a country and we're only going to do VPN services with making internet available to everyone. So, hat tip to Ben and the rest of his team. But not all operators are doing the same thing. And in fact, there are operators that have connectivity, that are in country, big operators that feel that this is not important. This internet thing, it's a fad. Who cares about, all the social media nonsense? Who cares about email? We're reserving this bandwidth for our expensive VPNs. How much is that derailing us from actually increasing what we would otherwise see as true cross-border connectivity?
Well, for us, Simbanet, our commercial people tend to charge the customers as much as they can, but then there's this little thing that we call competition that is in almost all the places we step. So, thanks to our competitors, our customers get lower prices.
I want to talk about gatekeepers, really. So Ben mentioned about cross-connection prices, some of the cross-connection prices to get onto European cables. So some of the cables that have been developed out of Africa are shorter ones to go and connect onto existing systems. I'm a board member of Teams in Kenya, and we built a fiber to UAE in partnership with Etisalat. And Etisalat invested in that system, so they invested $25 million into building that system. Now, they didn't need that capacity to Africa, so they invested that, and didn't have a market to sell that capacity as such, and haven't lit up much of their capacity. But they have a business model of making their money back from charging cross-connect fees. And there's other countries, and Djibouti Telecom are a similar model of making their investment back by charging cross-connect fees. But I mean, boy, have they made it back again and again and again. And the cross-connect fees at Fujairah have consistently been around 30 to 50% of the cost of getting to Europe. So just to get a wire in a landing station is initially was costing $30, $40 a megabits per second. It's now down at around $5, but it's a significant chunk of the cost of getting your packets from Kenya to Europe, and that might appear to be greed at the end of the day.
For a lot of operators in Africa, for some countries, you have smaller operators as well as large, much bigger operators. I mean, at the end of the day, businesses are here to make money, okay? And so sometimes the choices or the decisions they make tries to guarantee, the bottom line, basically. For some of the large operators, they can make a lot more strategic decisions in terms of how do we grow the pie, as opposed to how do we have a larger chunk of the existing pie. And which is what we're seeing more in Africa, with the much larger operators making more strategic decisions to open up Africa a lot more and create great opportunities. I think this is also translating in the fact that there's a consistent reduction in the price of internet access in Africa. However, I don't particularly see that challenge in West Africa. Maybe some other operators have that, but I don't particularly see that challenge. I don't think I've faced that challenge where we go to a particular location and we say, oh, we won't do this, we won't do that, we'll only do this kind of service. No.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got a huge amount to add to what's already been said. I do think that your point, although you've spoken about a manifestation of it, I think it does to a very large extent come down to regulation. I think that if one finds themselves in a position to behave like a monopoly, trying to explain to one's shareholders why we're going to choose to make less money is actually quite a difficult explanation to provide. The ridiculous pricing that we still see in the market, and the cross connects are a good example of that, and as are bandwidth costs in some countries, are a symptom of a monopoly environment. And I mean, to maybe expand on the question about what would I like regulators to do, is to focus exclusively on addressing market failures, and monopolies are market failures. And if we address that thoroughly, all of the ecosystem infrastructure, the carrier neutral data centers, and the availability of dark fiber in the metros and the internet exchanges, all of that springs up in the right regulatory environment naturally. That doesn't need to be managed.
Well, actually, thank you, Nisha, for raising this question. I think the comments from my colleagues on the table were valid, and I actually do share the same feelings that they have. You just mentioned, and if I may use your word, on the west coast of Africa, we actually see some places, and we think backhauling remains a problem in a few places as well. But I was also happy to see the first presentation of tailored geography, that the prices in Africa are also coming down. Because I think this is the way that Africa will go as well. And the prices are coming down, especially on a few specific routes. Actually, South Africa to London is going on a very aggressive way down. And I think other places will follow the same path. It's just a matter of time, in my point of view.
We have time for a very last small question. So anyone else but Nishala? Oh, we have someone else. Sorry, Nishala.
Yes, my question is about the regulation. In Tanzania, it was passed by the parliament, the Cybercrime Act 2015. And my question to you is, because I know cybercrime, as much as it is good, it can also be very inhibiting in terms of the services that from one point to another, especially on the content level. My question is, in Africa, I mean, how many have you come across such cybercrime acts that have become inhibitive in terms of what you do?
The in the countries where we are, the Cybercrime Acts are currently open for public comment, and we commented on Kenya, and we're in the process of commenting on Zimbabwe. I don't know of any other enforced cybercrime acts in any countries where we operate. It's inhibitive. A cybercrime act would be inhibitive if it requires us to cooperate with law enforcement without a court, without a court warrant. So if you get a situation where we're required to give up private information about our customers just because a policeman comes in and walks in and asks a question, that wouldn't be acceptable to us, because policemen not always the most trusted source in some of the countries. The police are not trusted in some of the countries where we operate. If a due process has gone into place and a warrant has been achieved, then we are happy to work within that legal framework. And I think I said yesterday, as long as the network operator or the caching provider or whoever, or website hoster, as long as they are indemnified from the crimes of whoever is doing the crime on the network, then all is good.
Well, for Nigeria, there is a Cybercrime Act, and what we find as an operator is that it's not necessarily inhibitive. However, it's bringing on us some extra demand with respect to being able to provide detailed information if an investigation is being conducted. So, there's some responsibility on the providers to be able to monitor traffic to some extent. There's some debate about it, but we'll see how it goes. It's a new act, and then things will evolve. But there's obligation on the providers to be able to supply some kind of information when there's a warrant.
Yeah, it's interesting. This really isn't my field, but I was actually asked to speak on a panel on this topic a couple of months back in Gaborone, so I had to do a bit of homework at that stage. I think it's important to note that's not an African problem. That challenge exists all over the world, insofar as there is a problem with the legislative frameworks that affect us as an industry overall. In the more developed markets, that this is the area. As I say, I'm not an expert, so I don't really want to comment on specifics. But I've certainly heard the same criticisms in terms of imposing additional operational burden that's a bit ambiguous, and a lack of due process in terms of internet information gathering and personal privacy protections. I've heard the African Union Convention on Cybercrime criticized on the same basis, and that's obviously continent-wide. Now, as far as I'm aware, and there's probably someone who can correct me on this, that hasn't yet been ratified by very many countries, if any. But as and when it does, that will be, they'll be expected to promulgate legislation locally to enact that. So if the AU convention makes it through ratification with those shortcomings, then I think after that we can expect a slew of legislation in each of the member countries with the same problems. But as I say, this is not an African problem. This is the whole industry that's battling with this. I was at a UK NOF at the beginning of this year, and there was a 2-hour-long session dedicated to the bill that's going through the Parliament in the UK at the moment, which has exactly these problems. On one interpretation of that, network operators could be required to keep, I think it was 9 months of unsampled net flow for all traffic going over their network. I can't do that. I don't know if any of you can do that. Yeah, little bit. There's a lot of disk.
That's inhibitive, huh?
Yeah, I tried to
Just 10 seconds.
not any incidents yet, apart from your odd spamming or DDoSing or code scanning customers, but I've once discussed the possibility with a government side stakeholder of a policeman standing in the door what Ben Roberts mentioned, and I was advised to go with a policeman to the police station to check if there's really a proper file and everything. So that's probably what we have to do. So.
Well, thank you. I can hear from that panel and the discussion we have that everybody here is willing to invest. Everybody wants to go to foreign countries, foreign continents, and deploy networks. So investment in here, we have people willing to go for competition, waiting for competitor, waiting to enter the market. And one of the key is regulation. If you had better regulation, easier cross-border, that would be, that would make Africa be an open market like we have in Europe, in US, or in some part of Asia. So I will give you briefly 10, 15, 26 seconds to, if you have anything to add before closing the panel.
Yeah, my favorite African airline is Kenya Airways. And I think their marketing slogan is taking Africa to the world and bringing the world to Africa. And I think we're the ones bringing Africa to the world, and then a lot of people in the room are bringing the world to Africa, and somewhere we'll all meet.
I definitely got a few words as well. I definitely want to congratulate Internet Society and the community to organize those events, which are very important in our point of view. It's our first time sponsoring, but not our last time. And you can count on us on the next African Peering Forums as well. And one thing I didn't say, we got an internet exchange point in Angola, which is called Angonix. The back of side, you can see it. And if there is any internet service providers or CDNs who want some Portuguese content, just feel free to hook me up. Thank you very much.
My final words would be that West Africa, once again, will probably be looking forward to hosting AFPIF. And Mayone would love to be at the center of that engagement. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose I'd just like to thank ISOC and the sponsors for another good event. It's really nice to see this community growing and for such an emphasis to be being placed on interconnection on the continent as well, because I mean, it's something without which we couldn't run our business. And every year that goes by, I see this community grow, and I see people more willing to work with each other and reach out and solve problems together. And I don't think that the day when the ease of running a network here is the same as some of the other parts of the world is that far off, actually.
Okay, like what many others have said, we have to keep working on it. We are working on it. Let's work together. Thanks, the port is up. Eric and Arusha will do something. And with the Banky Ku, I have to talk very soon with the central bank. Thanks.
Well, let me thank our panelists, Isaac and our locals from Tanzania for this great panel. Just some housekeeping, so you can now go outside and enjoy the solar eclipse. Please don't look directly at the sun. It's even worse than looking at your SFPs. So you may get blind and it doesn't get too many bits in the air. We'll be going to lunch after, and we have the group picture at just after the eclipse. At what, 12:30 or at noon? At 2, just before starting back. Well, I'll let Michuki give you the housekeeping stuff.
Okay, so we call this a triple treat AFPIF. So AFPIF, Tanzania, and the solar eclipse. So the solar eclipse is about to take place. The maximum view will be in about 5-10 minutes. So you get the opportunity to see that. And just after, it sort of ends at around 12:04. So just after it ends, if you get to the front, the entrance of the hotel, we'll take the group photo there. So depending on where you choose to go and see it, at the end around 12:10, if you could all be at the front, 12:15 thereabouts, we'll take the group photo, and then you go for lunch. We'll come back from lunch a little bit earlier because we've broken off early. So we'll be back at around 1:30. 1:45, and at 1:45 we'll have the next sessions. So we'll give us a little bit more time to catch up on where we've lost. So thank you, and please enjoy the solar eclipse. Part of the trip.
Just to add, for now we have gotten access to the roof, which is normally closed during the day. So we don't need to stand in the parking lot. We can go to the roof.
And one last thing for those who want to host Atlas probes in your country, I still have some. So come see me if we're looking, for nice homes and nice network to host those babies. Thanks.